Hey, we're having a Black Friday sale on all of our online resources, and instead of one day, it's lasting from now until Sunday, November 28th. 50% off all of our books, playlists, and courses. No code needed. We went ahead and changed the prices for you. These are all of the resources that we wish we had while planning for our home birth. All of them are designed to help you feel more confident, prepared, and excited for home birth. We even have partner resources. So go to yoursuccessfulhomebirth.com again for 50% off everything. yoursuccessfulhomebirth.com. Hey, I'm Sarah Bivens.
And I'm Matthew Bivens.
And this is the Doing It at Home podcast, the only podcast dedicated to empowering, loving, and honest conversations around home birth. What started as a fun way for us to document our own home birth journey has turned into a platform for sharing birth stories, resources, and education with the goal of empowering mamas and families to make the birth decisions that work best for them.
Plus, we get into the antics, breakdowns, and breakthroughs of our own experience of marriage and parenthood.
All right, you ready, babe?
Yep, let's do it, mama.
Hello there, and welcome back, everyone, to the Doing It at Home podcast. I am one of your hosts, Sarah Bivens. My other host is Matthew Bivens. You will hear his voice in a few short minutes here when we get into the interview. We just want to welcome you and thank you so much for being here and being a part of this space, being a part of this community, and supporting us by listening to the podcast. There's so many ways that you can support Doing It at Home as a community, as a philosophy, as an experience, and listening to the podcast is one of the ways that you can do that. So thank you. To extend that support, if you are getting something out of the show, if you are receiving value from listening to these stories and what we're creating here for you, there are a number of ways you can support further and be engaged further. One of which is to subscribe if you are not already. So subscribe to the podcast, follow us on social media, visit our website, check out our shop, which has a bunch of really cool stuff in it that's been added lately. I am sipping some tea out of my Have Babies Where You Make Them mug right now. If you would like your very own, you can check it out there in the store. The links to everything I've just listed, from our social accounts to our website, which is diahpodcast.com, by the way. So you could go there and find all these links as well. But if you just scan real quick, whatever you're listening with, whatever device, whatever platform, there should be a show description of this episode. And beneath that are links to all the things that I just mentioned. So the shop, you can get your own Have Babies Where You Make a mug or tank or sweatshirt or tote bag. Yes, we have tote bags. We just added them recently, and all sorts of other really great stuff. And that is how you can show your support and also wear some really cool stuff that's all about birth empowerment. And they're great conversation starters as well. Some of the things we have in there, we have one of our new graphics is Meconium happens, because it does, y'all. It happened in our birth. So sometimes it happens. Yeah. So go check that out. And our private Facebook group as well. I didn't mention that, but that's another great way to engage, to learn from others, to, have a dialogue with us that isn't really possible through this podcasting platform. So Doing It at Home has many branches, and the podcast is one of them. So if you did not know about all those other ways to connect and engage, go do so. And the book is dropping pretty soon as well, the Doing It at Home book. So yes, very excited for that. Today, we have an awesome conversation for you. We're chatting with mom and dad. We love when we get that bonus of being able to speak to partner as well. And we had a great time. We chatted with Briahnna and Jerry. And there's a lot of cool synchronicities between us and our families. They're a podcasting couple as well. They have a podcast called Single to Sealed. And then they have their YouTube channel, which is really cool too. So I'll have links to that in the show notes for you. And we talk about that a little bit in our conversation. But we get to hear the differences between their first and second birth. The first one having some traumatic elements to it and really inspiring, making some changes for the second birth. And for Briahnna, it was really about birthing on her terms in that second birth. And we talk about postpartum depression and how Briahnna experienced some of that and what came up for her, how she moved through it. And then also shifting to the perspective of partner in how Jerry experienced that and how he supported Briahnna. And it's a really rich, raw, vulnerable, transparent conversation that I think is so important. This whole conversation has a lot of really great nuggets, and not only is it them sharing their experience, but there are great tips and takeaways for you throughout this. So have a notebook out or be ready to pause and re-listen to certain parts. And I will put another directive out there for you that if you are listening to this and you are a birthing person preparing for your birth or preparing for pregnancy to prepare for a birth, make sure you have your partner, if applicable, listen to this podcast with you. Definitely listen to this episode because we have dad and partner's perspective, but in general, send them episodes, send them snippets of things that you think would be great for them to hear in preparation for the journey, for the experience. I would say it's vital. So I'm just going to put that out there. That's just my homework for you there. In the conversation with Brianna and Jerry, we also talk about connecting with your midwife and what that looks like for us. For many of us, it's very different. What point is important for you when it comes to your care provider. So we chat about that. We talk about some of the classes that they took that were really helpful for them. And one of the great themes that comes out of this conversation for me is that when we change the way we approach childbirth, we change the world. And we talk about that. And then, of course, circling back again, Jerry and his role and how big it was. And he was the birth room bouncer, so to speak, for the home birth. And again, just some really great takeaways and tips for the birthing partner there. So some keywords for you, things to look out for if it's relevant to you or things that you are interested in learning about or might be in your own experience and you want to hear others and how they navigated. We talk about birth trauma. We talk about postpartum depression. We talk about birthing classes. We talk about fetal ejection reflex. We talk about GBS, group strep B, and gestational diabetes, to just name a few of the many themes that come up in this conversation. Thank you to Brianna and Jerry. Y'all are awesome. We appreciate you. Quick word from our sponsor, and then let's hear their story. Are you pregnant and feeling overwhelmed by the books, classes, and all the advice you're getting? Meet 7 Starling, an all-in-one support system that guides you every step of the way from pregnancy through postpartum, from childbirth education to newborn care to postpartum recovery and more, all from the comfort of your own home. Here's how it works. You get matched with a dedicated doula and a hand-picked small group with similar due dates to yours to go through your journey with. You meet virtually every other week, and you can text your expert anytime for additional support. This is the kind of stuff I wish we knew about when we were pregnant. We've been able to access 7 Starling's programs and chat with their experts. This is an affordable and effective way to get education and, importantly, community. All of this support at your fingertips for just $37 a month, and you can cancel at any time. When you use the code DIAH15, you'll get 15% off the entire duration of your membership. Go to 7starling.com to take a short quiz and get started. That's SEVENSTARLING.com and use the code DIAH15. Hey, Brianna and Jerry, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having us. We're excited to be here.
Ditto.
Yay!
Yeah, we're super pumped that you all chose to hang out with us today. You are blessing us and the whole community with your presence and story. So thank you all for joining.
Oh, thank you. We're happy to be here.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your family.
So my name is Brianna. My husband is Jerry. We've been married for almost 4 years. It'll be 4 years in May. And we have 2 children. We have 2 girls, a almost 3-year-old and a 6.5-month-old. And we live in Indianapolis.
Nice. What are you up to in Indianapolis? What's a daily life in what am I saying? Day in the life for you all. What's that like?
Let's see. Day in the life. Well, we moved here because of work, actually, and I work at the hospital, and so I'm gone for maybe 4 or 5 hours a day, which isn't that bad. So I come home, and then Brianna works from home, so she gets the joy of keeping the kids from screaming. Having fun all day. And then I come home and try to relieve some of that pressure and figure out what else we're gonna do. We have a vlog, so sometimes we go out and it gives us a reason to go out and see the town.
COVID has kind of put a damper on all of that, though. So just been kind of sticking close to home right now.
I like how you just nonchalantly said, "Oh yeah, we have a vlog." I mean, we were watching it. Sarah and I watched it.
We were checking it out earlier.
You guys are huge, and you have so many people who listen and comment, and what you guys do is totally legit. So will you just take another 30 seconds to quickly tell us about this little tiny vlog of yours?
Well, I'd say it's still kind of small, but yeah, we have a vlog called Ready Scots Go, where we just explore all the different cities we live in. So we take these books called like the 100 Things to Do in wherever city you're in before you die, and we try to do a bunch of those activities. And we've only done maybe a quarter of those before we moved to a new place.
Yeah, we've been kind of moving all over the place. My husband's from California, from San Diego, and I was actually raised in the Chicagoland area. We met in Utah when we were in our early 20s, and we lived in Utah, and that's when we started the vlog. And we started going to different places in Salt Lake, and then we moved to New York for my husband's schooling. We were in Manhattan, and we tried to do it there, but we only got a few things done before we moved again. And then we moved to Indianapolis, so now we're here.
Very cool.
It's such a cool concept to take those books that we've all seen and
live it.
And to live it.
Yeah.
Like to actually go through it and do it and get to know your city. And, you guys are so much fun, and watching you in the vlog is so cool. So we totally recommend, Sarah and I recommend everyone listening, go check them out.
Yeah, that's our daytime presence for internet. And then after everyone goes to bed at night, we record our podcast.
Very cool. Oh my gosh, there's a lot of synchronicity here.
Yeah.
There is, but we're not nearly as cool as you guys.
Debatable. But what's the podcast?
So our podcast is called Single to Sealed. It focuses on Christian dating. So we help people be more confident in their ability to date and find someone who's good for them.
And that's actually really new. We just started it just a few weeks ago. So we're slowly building a following. We had 1,000 listens last week, and that was really exciting for us.
Yeah, that's a great milestone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You celebrate that.
Yeah,
That's
we were pretty
beautiful.
excited.
Yeah, we high-fived.
Yeah.
Yep.
Got to celebrate those moments.
I
That's
got it.
great. Well,
And-
congrats to you guys on that.
Well, real quick, I want to go back to the vlog for just one more second, because there is
Definitely.
one video that's very popular, and I think you know the one I'm about to say, but you
Yes.
made a hairstyle choice, Brianna, and
Yes.
Jerry assisted you in this, and I won't go into too much because I do want people to watch it, but you did something pretty drastic, and it has gotten a lot of attention.
Yeah, I did. It has, I think, 30, almost 40,000 views. I think now I haven't looked at
Yeah.
it recently, but
Yeah.
it was up there pretty high. Yeah. Everyone said it was postpartum like craziness, but
That's
I've been wanting to do it for years, so I just finally had the balls to just do it, and that's what I did.
cool.
cool.
Are you still rocking the do now?
I am. Yeah. I
Yeah.
thought that I would go back and start, growing it out again, but I haven't yet because I just really enjoy it. And it's so easy when you have kids. The shorter the hair, the easier it is. So I haven't changed it up yet.
It's crazy how many people are interested in watching that kind of stuff
Yeah.
online, because like we have all these vlogs that we do, but like our greatest videos are Brianna's home birth video and her haircut. Like
That's too funny.
Yeah.
like by miles. Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, because your vlog is about going out and exploring the city, but the ones that take
Mhm.
place at home
Mm-hmm.
get the most views. It's so, like you never know.
Yep.
Yeah.
You never know what people are gonna be gravitate towards.
Yep.
Well,
People are-
home birth, I'm sure, is not on those travel book guides of things to do in certain cities, but you could write your own on that and add that whatever city you've had your births in, like, hey, this is a great place to have a home birth.
Nice segue,
Exactly.
Yeah,
Well, I love
thank
my
you.
midwives out here, so
Oh,
I
okay.
definitely recommend them to everyone I can because they were incredible. So it's a great place to birth here in Indiana.
What's the name of your midwifery? We can give them a shout out.
They're the Wabash Valley Midwives.
Wabash Valley, and we'll put a link in show notes to that.
Sounds good. Yeah, they're incredible.
And that is a great point that you bring up, Brianna, I'm taking from what you said and making the point that, birthing communities are different throughout the country in terms of access to resources, the quality of care, et cetera. So, kind of joking, but not really, a guide on where the best places to have certain kinds of births. We might be onto something.
Oh,
Because
yeah,
It
definitely.
makes a difference where you are.
Yeah, and I found them through a home birth. It's called Home Birth Indy, which is because we're in Indianapolis. So I would highly recommend, if you're going to be birthing at home, that you join a home birth group that's kind of in your area, and you ask
Yep.
people for, references for good midwife groups out there that you can connect with. So that's how I found them.
That's one of our biggest recommendations for people who don't really know where to turn. You can go to
Yep.
Facebook and type in your city and midwife or home birth group, and there's probably going to be something.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
it's a great place. So awesome. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
How and why did home birth come up for you all, and at what point? Is it something you had known about previously and maybe thought about, or was it a new concept later on in your journey?
So when we were preparing for our first daughter, and her birth, I originally was scheduled to go with a hospital birth, and the closer I got to, preparing for that birth, I was doing more and more research and watching more and more birth videos. And then we joined a birthing class, and I just realized that I didn't want to have a medicated birth. Nothing wrong with that for people who want that, but it just wasn't something that I wanted. And so I started doing research on midwife groups, and I found a birthing center. And I was a little bit scared to take that leap and do a home birth because I was a first-time mom, but I thought it was a pretty happy medium. So my husband was on board, and I decided to go with this midwifery group, and that kind of opened the door for home birth for me. But my experiences in that first birth were what pushed it even wider, because I didn't have a great first birth. I felt very pressured by the midwives that I decided to go with, which is what I tell people all the time now, is like, really know your midwives and really lay down the law with them of what you do and do not want. Because I ended up getting coached through my pushing. Like, as soon as I hit 10 centimeters, like, they were like, it's time to push. And which was something that I didn't really want. And just a few other interventions that didn't help me. And so I ended up having a bad experience with that first one. So when I came time for the second birth, I told Jerry, I was like, I know I can do it. I know I can have the birth that I want, but it needs to be on my terms. And so that's why I ended up going with a home birth, is because I wanted everything just on my terms and to be in my own safe space and to be making all the decisions for my body and my baby.
That's really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate you sharing that. And, the one thing that comes up for me, and I'm thinking about the listener who is maybe exploring the idea of home birth, or is maybe, early on in that journey, and they're looking at, hospital, birthing center, home birth, and, the whole range, that, even within midwifery care, there are things to do your due diligence on and have
Yes.
those conversations. And like you said, really know your midwife, because you might make an assumption that just because you're going into a birthing center and working with midwives, you just might make certain assumptions on what that means or what that might look like. And yet, having those conversations and learning about, the self-advocacy and just all of that, it's still relevant and still important. So I appreciate that you bring that to the table here, for someone who's thinking, well, I'm just going to go with a midwife, and that just means like done. I don't have to do any further, research. I don't have to have any further conversations. They're going to be this kind of midwife, like where
Exactly.
in fact, there's probably a spectrum of the type of care within midwifery.
Oh, 100%. No two midwives are created equally. 100%. And I think a lot of it has to do, though, with self-advocacy. Like you said, you need to be strong enough to say, this is what I did with my second birth when I met with them for the first time, because I interviewed multiple midwives in preparation for my second birth. I told them in the interview, I said, I don't want you to lay a single hand on me. I was like, I had a bad experience with my first birth, and I just want you guys to be completely hands off unless there's an absolute medical emergency and we're in jeopardy. But I said, I want my body to do its own thing. And and they agreed with that, and they were fully supportive of that. And that was one of the reasons why I decided to go with them.
Mm-hmm.
And also it's a vibe.
Yeah.
That sounds kind of weird, but it's totally a vibe when you're interviewing people, because there was multiple midwives I interviewed that I just didn't feel that connection with. And so you have to feel them out for sure.
What was
Absolutely.
it for you that created connection?
Honestly, it sounds super cheesy, but like we believe in like spiritual stuff, right? It's just like a spiritual connection almost. Like you just feel understood. And just when I was talking to them and explaining my bad first experience to them, like they're just very understanding, and like they just had such a calming presence. And it was funny because we were doing it over Zoom because of COVID. But even through the Zoom call, I just felt like they really got what I was trying to say. And that totally carried across the entire birth experience with them. They were always that calm, like good presence.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that's significant is making sure that the group that you choose has a sufficient number of midwives, like, or teams / like coverage, that they can take care of you depending on no matter when like your birth is going to happen. So that's kind of an unfair roadblock we maybe fell into with our first birth, is that the midwives were really, really great all the way up until this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because both of the other midwives she was with were out of town and
No, they're at other births.
or out of the births.
Mm-hmm.
And it was another birth that just started like as we're 4 hours into ours. And so now ours is like kind of rushing our experience
Oh, interesting.
to get to the other one and vocalize that to us. Like, there's another person going into birth, so we got to wrap this up kind of thing. And that was kind of, off kilter.
Well, I don't know like how much you guys want to air, but like they honestly were very pressured. Like I got multiple cervical checks in my first, and as soon as I hit 10 centimeters, she's like, okay, it's time to push. Let me teach you how to push. And was like having me do different positions and telling me to when to push. And I just don't think my body was ready. And so, watching it back is actually really painful for me because I can see that I wasn't ready, especially after experiencing my second birth. So I ended up pushing for close to an hour. And the only reason that my daughter was actually born within that 55-minute window was because they threatened me with an episiotomy, which my midwife knew I was like so afraid to get, because I told her that the only thing I didn't want was an episiotomy. I was afraid of that. And so as I was pushing, she goes, "Oh, someone get me the episiotomy scissors." And as soon as she said that, I pushed my baby out because I was scared of getting that. And and you can watch the video and I'm like, "No, please." And then I pushed her out. And just like looking back, like that was just a horrible traumatic event. Of course, the birth of my daughter was amazing, and I love it for that reason. But going into my second birth, I was like, that is not happening again.
Yeah.
I'm going to be in the position of power. I'm going to make all the decisions. And I felt kind of gypped of that experience that I wanted so badly, that I wanted to be sure that it never happened again.
Yeah. Oh, and there's so many that unfortunately can identify with you on that are listening now, that have felt that or know someone who has, and your story is so important. It's so valuable. It's so worthy of this attention and this sharing and this collective healing that I feel like can take place when you do share this, because some of the points that you bring up in just the past few minutes are so very rich. Going back to what it means for you to connect with a care provider, for you, there was something, it was just spiritual alignment and this, yes, like the vibes. And that's going to be the case for someone else. Or it could be, understanding their breadth of knowledge, their history, the number of clients they've worked with. Maybe it's connecting with their other clients to get that firsthand experience. And then Jerry, the point you bring up of getting a feel for and an understanding of the bandwidth of your care providers as well, and how they are planning their schedule and how many people they're taking on and how many people they have access to share as resources with you if they are not available. These are all such great things to go through. And so for you to have your unique experience and be able to extract those really helpful points for others, and now to be able to share it and still recognize that there were traumatic elements for you in the experience. It's also raw and vulnerable and beautiful. And I just wanted to take that moment to acknowledge. And I feel particularly for our births, it can be such a soul grappling thing when there's birth, right? And we recognize it as being this beautiful thing. And yet when there are parts of it that go the way that they go, that can just feel so splitting. I feel like as a human being and energetically, when, birth is what it is. And yet many of us walk away with traumatic elements to it.
Oh, definitely. And I think it definitely had a part to play in my recovery after my first birth, because I struggled with postpartum depression really badly afterwards. And my recovery was hard because I had a second degree tear. And so, of course, that affects you when you're having this major healing, also taking care of a newborn, also going back to work within, a month and a half, and all this stuff going on. Like, I had really bad postpartum depression to the point where I was having suicidal thoughts. And I definitely think that the way you birth affects your recovery. Not always, but for me, it was a huge part of my recovery.
Yeah. I'm curious, Jerry, how was it for you being a part of that experience as well? And then also being witness to Brianna and her partner and her support, just what that was like for you.
I think the first time I was so caught up in the moment that a lot of the trainings and practices that I had in my mind for how to be a good, daddy doula. I'm constantly looking at my notes instead of looking at the situation, type of thing. And, as we're approaching towards the end, of this first birth, I'm noticing, these things happen. And I'm just at this point trying my best to keep people in the room calm and keep Brianna calm to the best of my ability. But above all that, I think that we saw all the elements that were great and we saw the ones that weren't so great. And so, the word perfect doesn't describe the second birth that we had. It's not good enough. I feel like it was so good. It was just better than perfect. Just from the people that were there, from our experience, the way we handled it, not a single thing went wrong. And the way that Brianna was able to manage herself and knew how she wanted to manage herself this time versus last time, and the involvement I knew she wanted, because of my experience last time. All of these things they ended up being a trial for good. So that now we have this standard of, this is really what we feel like home birth could be like. And this is the type of experience that we would want to shout out, that we would want other people to have, because it was like a dream.
And I just want to give kudos to Jerry, because he's been always sticking by me through all of it, all of everything I wanted. And when it came to preparing for this birth, the second birth, even after the traumaticness surrounding the first, he was truly the only supportive person I had in my corner that thought it was a good idea for me to do a home birth for this baby. Because even my mom, she was there for the first birth, and because we had a hospital transfer and everything afterwards, she was just saying, there's no point in you having a home birth because you'll probably have to go to the hospital again afterwards, or how last time went, and kind of lots of negative talk from her and my good friends and my sister. And Jerry was the only one who I kept on looking to him for reassurance. And I would say, do you think I can do it? Do you really think I can? And he would always say, yes, I know you can do it. I believe in you. Whatever you want to do, I fully support you. And he was the most supportive partner through the entire experience.
That's powerful.
Way to go,
That's awesome.
Jerry.
Thank you.
So how would you guys describe that your relationship changed after the first birth, postpartum depression, and before you started flowing into baby number 2? How did your relationship shift?
It was hard.
I know. I definitely think it's hard. I think just postpartum, obviously depression is its own topic, but having Brianna have all these feelings and not really know what feelings are real versus the depression, and how to involve me. She didn't even know if she wanted me to be around. But she also did want me to be around at the same time. It's really hard as a partner to try to gauge how you're best going to take care of your partner who had the baby, and that's what we really struggled with. But it was just trying my best to constantly reassure her, despite all things, I love you, whatever you want me to do, just tell me. And unfortunately, it wasn't that easy. I was rarely told what she actually wanted me to do. And so it really was up to me to just kind of feel it out and seek to make the right choice of what I knew about her. So it helped me grow from a superficial, vocal communicative level to a deeper level of how well do I understand my wife, that I was able to solve some of her concerns without her mentioning anything. And I think that's a good experience for someone to have.
Oh,
it's powerful.
That's pause, rewind, and re-listen for any birthing person right now, and to then share that with their partner. That's just what I'll say to that. Just re-listen to that a few times, because I think there's a lot of power in those words.
And I think as the birthing person, there comes a point where you have to accept help,
Yeah.
and if you don't, then you're not going to progress or go anywhere. It's just going to get worse. And that came for me a couple weeks after I had her, when things were getting really bad. And I didn't really tell Jerry how bad it was getting, but I remember like the moment vividly when I did. I was sitting on the couch and I pulled him over, and I just started crying. And I was like, babe, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I literally have thoughts of just like wanting to walk out the front door and in front of oncoming traffic, because that's how sad, like, and how horrible I felt. And I remember telling him that, and his face was just like white. He like didn't even know how to react, because he didn't know that I was feeling like that. And he probably would never have known if I wouldn't have communicated that fully to him. And when I did, that's when I was able to start reaching out to my mom and my friends and people to come over and help relieve me of some of my duties as a mom. My mom would come over almost every night of the week, even though she was working full time, and she would stay up with the baby so that I could get a full night's rest. And when you're in postpartum depression, like, sleep is everything. When you have good sleep, it feels like you can conquer it so much better. And so things like that were major turning points for me in overcoming that.
Wow, what courage it took for you to share with Jerry and then to ultimately ask for help. That's beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
One point that I just want to go back to for a second, in case someone was wondering about the postpartum transfer, and that was related to your tear. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think it was ultimately related to the fact that the midwife didn't want to take the time to stitch me up because she had another birth. I don't think it was actually, I had a second degree tear, which midwives are generally very equipped to handle that. But she took one look and she's like, yeah, I can't do that. We're going to have to do a hospital transfer. And so I transferred over there, and I had to stay overnight. Luckily, they didn't admit my daughter, so they didn't have to put any of the eye ointment in her or anything like that they usually have to do in the hospital. And so I got to keep her with me all night, and she didn't have to go to the nursery. But it was still traumatic to have to be brought in an ambulance and then taken and stitched up there. And yeah.
For sure.
Then, of course, you don't get great sleep in the hospital because they come in every hour or so to check on you, and home birth is way better.
And everything seemed to go really well. It was just right at that end when she was threatened that, she just pushed with everything she had, and it just, your body doesn't really work that way.
Yeah.
So cause problems.
Well, one thing that I'm going to go back to what you said earlier, Brianna, about advocating for yourself. We haven't heard very many accounts or a lot of advice about advocating with your midwife. A lot of times we hear, I went through this experience at the hospital with the doctors and the nurses, and that taught me to advocate for myself, and so I chose home birth. And what I think is a powerful takeaway for listeners is that advocating for yourself is something that can happen with whomever your care provider is. It can happen with your partner, where you're clear about something that you want for you, and your partner might be steering in a different direction. So just that takeaway of the power and strength in being able to advocate for yourself and going through whatever an individual must go to get to the point where they do feel confident speaking up for themselves and speaking their truth. I think that's a great takeaway, because it might be with your midwife. It might be with your, a family member. It might be with whomever. And your sharing around that is something that I want people to take away. So thank you again.
Oh, thank you. I think it's important to note that we fight so hard for women's rights and like body autonomy and all of that so hard. But then when it comes to birthing, everybody's like, nope, let the doctor do whatever they want with you. And I just think it's kind of ridiculous, because as a woman, as the birthing mother, you have a power that no one else has, because it's happening to you. And it's not just happening to you, your body's just not just doing whatever it wants. It's happening with you. You and the baby are working together. And above anyone else's voices in that room, yours is the most important, and is like 99.9999% of every voice that needs to be heard in that room. So you have the power to say no to anything you want to. And I think that's something I didn't realize with the first birth. And I found my power in that experience, that I can do whatever I want. This is my experience.
I think a lot of that power comes from research, comes from knowledge. We don't just think, birth is natural, so I'm just going to show up and it's going to be done. I think the understanding of your body and its muscles and what it does and the chemicals and all this process is really key into having good birth. And the birthing class that Brianna signed us up for, really solidified this, before the first birth. And we actually took the class again, for a refresher before our second birth. And, as a consequence of that experience, we loved it so much. We've told several people. We've had like 6 or 7 other friends and peers who have taken it and have had home birth as a result of that, and all have praised it like crazy. And I just think it sounds so insane. And we're definitely in a world of culture, and people are there's like a majority rule, and if you don't fall in that majority, then you're crazy. And so if we can fully convince someone to say, hey, this is why this is important, I swear, just break the chain, break out of what the world and everybody wants you to see, and just see clearly what this could do for you. They take this class and their minds are changed. They're just I didn't know birth could be like this. I didn't know people could feel this way. I just watch movies and I assume that it's going to be a terrible,
excruciating
experience.
Yeah.
That ends up being different. I tell people all the time, I was like, Brianna had birth twice and didn't make a single shriek twice. Watching that happen, I still don't get it. I'm just how do you just have a birth and make it look easy? Everyone who was there was how did you make that look easy? And that's just obviously not, but it took a lot of work and strength from her. But I don't want to undercut it by saying it's easy, but that's how it looked like. Mm-hmm. It looked easy. And that's just nothing that I'd ever heard anybody say.
I totally get that. And, and you all sharing your story here on this platform, as well as sharing that you do on your YouTube channel, I think that it does a tremendous amount to help people to see birth in a different way and to think about birth in a different way, and then to put themselves in, a different reality when it comes to a birth that they might be stepping into.
Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, let's talk about the second birth. Okay, so walk us through your home birth.
Okay, so sorry, excuse me. So with my second birth, I had, like I said, decided that I wanted it to be different. And so when I became pregnant, we were really excited, of course, and I was thrilled because I felt like I got a do-over of my first birth. And so right off the bat, I didn't know if I wanted a home birth. So I actually was seeing an OBGYN, who she was fantastic, by the way. And if I would have had to birth with her, that would have been okay. But especially when COVID hit, that gave me the little nudge that was you need to birth at home. And that kind of gave me the confidence because I knew I didn't want to, jeopardize my baby or my health. And I wanted to have my partner there. And, that was kind of iffy during those early COVID times of being able to have a partner in the room. And that gave me the nudge that I needed to be brave enough to seek out a home birth midwife.
And the reason that we were starting with an OBGYN was because we weren't finding any birthing centers or suites that we felt comfortable attending in our area.
And that were affordable.
So we weren't going to settle for that just because we've done it before.
Yeah.
We said we did some research and found that, you can have similar experiences with really good doctors that can be hands off in a hospital too.
Love that.
And so that's kind of why we ended up going back towards the hospital route.
Yeah. And the one birthing suite we found that was close enough to our house that I felt comfortable was almost $10,000. And of course, it's not covered by insurance. And we're just, we're young, fresh out of college students, so we don't have a ton of money. And so that was kind of a major deciding factor, is what our insurance could cover. But when I finally took that step forward and decided to do home birth is a lot more affordable. I think ours was $3,700 or something. Mm-hmm. And I found these midwives. I interviewed a couple others before this one, or this group. And like I talked about, I just felt that connection. And so I started seeing them right about, I think I was 23 weeks pregnant by that point. And we did a lot of Zoom calls, and sometimes they would come to my home and visit me because their office was actually an hour and a half from my house. And so they were extending their boundaries just for me to visit with me, which was really great too. Midwives are awesome, you guys. They really take care of you. They're so amazing.
Yeah.
And so, early in a few weeks after I started seeing them, I found out I had gestational diabetes. So I had to go on a full keto diet to help control that. No carbs, which is a big bummer when you're pregnant. But yeah, it helped keep the weight off though. I was really, really skinny. But Yeah, it was fine though. We managed, and then about a week and a half before I went into labor, I took my GBS test and I found out I was positive for that. And that kind of threw a wrench in things because I was really nervous. Because of course you'll go on and read all the horror stories, but in all reality, it's like way less than 1% actually contract it. And so after discussing with my midwife, I made the decision that I didn't want to have IVs because I didn't want to mess with my baby's microbiome. And Jerry was on board and fully supportive, like he always is. He's fantastic. And so we just talked about it, and we decided if I was in labor with my waters broken for a long period of time, then I would get the IV. But we just kind of waited out and see. And let's see, I was in prodromal labor for like 2 days before I went into actual labor, which is really sucky when you're very pregnant. You're just like, I just want it to happen already. But I definitely think it was doing a lot for me. I mean, a lot of work, just getting my body ready, looking back. And then I went into labor. Let's see, it was July 1st. And I would have been having contractions kind of all of the night before that. And so we set up our birthing tub because we had nothing set up, of course, the night before. So we blew it up and we're like, just in case I go into labor tonight, then we'll be ready. And so I didn't go into labor that night. I just had contractions on and off. The next day around 10 a.m., they started to get more intense. And so I told Jerry, let's go on a walk. Let's go kind of get some movement in. So we went on a walk, came back. And because I hadn't had ice cream my whole pregnancy and I was in labor, I was like, it's time. We're going to go get some ice cream. So we went and got ice cream while I was in labor, and then came back and ran some errands. Because when you're in labor, you kind of get in that major nesting mode where you just want to be doing something. So we ran some errands. And then when I came back, I decided I wanted to take a nap because for especially first-time moms, they say one of the main reasons for transfer to a hospital is exhaustion, just because you get so excited that you just do too much and you stay up and you don't sleep. So I came back and I took about an hour and a half, 2-hour nap, and I made sure I propped my legs up. I don't know if you guys know, the listeners know what a peanut ball is, but especially in the hospital, they use that a lot to help laboring mothers when they have epidurals, but they put it between your legs and like prop your leg up a certain way. You can look it up online, but I used pillows to prop my leg up really high while I slept so that my contractions could do more work for me. And I think it really helped because by the time I woke up, I was in pretty good full-blown labor. It felt like the contractions were getting stronger. And with this birth, more than the last birth, I really told myself with every contraction, I called them expansion waves, but I told myself open, and I told myself that it was like a pleasurable feeling. And sorry, excuse me. And I just tried to remind myself that the main feeling I was feeling was just my body opening. I think the word contractions does women a disservice because you think their whole body is just squeezing. But in reality, it's the muscles pulling your cervix open. And I just tried to keep that in my mind. And I brought in my hypnobirthing methods that I had studied for so long, which I loved one of our meditation tracks, which was a birth affirmation track. And I listened to that on repeat throughout my entire labor. And it was just like 16 minutes of just telling you over and over again things like, I baby my body, know what they're doing. I'm relaxed and at peace, things like that. And yeah, I kept on laboring at home. My husband just kind of hung out and got the house ready. And around 8:45, I felt like things were getting more intense. And since I knew it would take the midwives 2 hours to get there, I told my husband he should call them. And I actually told him he should call them because I said, if I talk to them on the phone, they're not going to think I'm far enough along because I was still really chill. I could talk through contractions, but women know, when you're close. And I felt really close. Like I felt like I was in labor and in active labor. And so he called them and they headed over and they got here around, what was it, babe? Like 9:45?
Yeah, they almost missed it.
Yeah. And when they got there, I think Jerry told me afterwards that they said, oh, we're going to be here for a while. Because they took one look at me and they're like, yeah, she's not that far along. Because I was watching The Office and just kind of hanging out, chatting. We were laughing. And then I'd get a contraction. I'd work through it. And then we'd go back to that.
Yeah, we've made that our birthing tradition is when Brianna's in labor, we turn on The Office and watch TV.
That's great.
I love The Office.
Oh,
I mean, you're in great company right now.
yes, you are.
Yeah. It's the best medicine is laughing when you're in labor. It helps keep your mind off it. But yeah, so they got there and I had 0 cervical checks. They didn't even ask me if I wanted one because I'd already told them and kind of laid down the law. Like I said, my final appointment, I told them, I was like, I just don't want you guys to touch me at all. I want 0 cervical checks. I just want you guys to just hang out and just be there. And so that's what they did. They came in, they sat on the bed and let me do my thing. I worked out on my birthing ball. I just did, circles on it. And yeah, you just got to find the position that works for you. But when things started to get more intense, I told them, I was like, I'm ready to get in the birthing tub. So they set it all up and I hopped in. And yeah, my water still hadn't broken. Things were going good. But then I felt a change. I started to get really nauseous, which I recognized from my first birth as transition. And I didn't tell anyone this, but when you're transitioning, you start to have super negative thoughts. And I started to have that thought come through, like, I can't do this. I can't do this again. It's going to go bad. I'm going to end up in the hospital to get stitched again. Like, I can't do this, over and over again. I can't do this. I can't do this. And I recognized that switch because I hadn't been having those negative thoughts the entire labor. And I told myself, I was like, you're in transition. You're going to be okay. Just keep breathing. And I worked through it. It lasted about 5 or so minutes. And then I threw up, which is never fun. And after that, I just felt my body start pushing her down. And with my first birth, I had been pushed, I had been being coached for pushing. And I hadn't really noticed what was happening with my body. When someone else is coaching you through it, you don't take that time to be aware of what's going on. But with this one, I really wanted to feel everything and pay attention. And it was the craziest feeling to feel her move down, like the birthing canal. And I could feel her getting lower and lower. And since I was the only one that, had to put my fingers inside me or anything to feel where she was, it just felt so personal. And I remember feeling her get really close down there, and FER kicked in so strong. And so if you don't know what FER, it's the fetal ejection reflex. And yeah, my body just completely took over. And I remember telling my midwife, I was like, I think I can push now. And she's like, okay, give it a little nudge. And if your body takes over, then just let it do its thing. So I did that. I gave the tiniest push. And as soon as I did that, it was like I opened the door for my body to do whatever it wanted. Wow. And so I actually ended up having to pant through those final contractions because I wanted to give my body time to stretch. Because my biggest goal was to not tear at all. And so I was like doing the horse lips, things that tell you to do, and panting through those final contractions and feeling the water break. Sorry, go ahead.
What does it mean to pant through?
Basically, you don't let your body push. You kind of fight that natural urge to push a little bit. Oh, okay. And instead of letting your body push, you just kind of like literally pant. You're like, and it helps you to do something besides let your body push. And that way I would let myself push just a little bit. So I'd give in a little bit to the contraction, and then I would stop it. And then I'd let myself stretch. And you can feel, just like our birthing class also told us about this, when you're stretching down there, instead to try to avoid the ring of fire, you can imagine it like if you're pulling your own lips like around your mouth with your fingers, you'll feel when you get too far, right? You'll feel that stretch on your mouth. Yeah. That if you pull further, it's going to hurt really bad. So when you're pushing, you can feel the same thing down there. And so to help avoid pushing, when you start to feel that tightness, that it feels too tight, that's when you pant, so that your body can make sure that you don't tear. Basically, it'll stretch a little bit more and blood flow can get down there. So that's what I did. So my final contractions, it was my second to last contraction when my water finally broke. And it was the weirdest feeling. It feels like a rubber band just like snapping inside you. And I didn't expect it, but it was really cool. And once that happened, she was out into small pushes. Oh, wow. And it was just, it was amazing. Mm-hmm. I've never thought that birth could be that incredible. And I'm almost crying thinking about it because it was just the most amazing experience of my life. Mm-hmm. And it was just pulling her up out of the water and looking at her. It just felt so healing, like the whole time. And she was born at 11:30, and the midwives got there right around 9:45. So they're about an hour and a half before she got there. And yeah, as soon as I pulled her up, they said, do you mind if we check to see if the cord is around her neck right before she came up? And I said, yes, that was the only intervention I had, if you want to call that an intervention. And they asked before they did it. But she had no cord, and she was very alert. She cried as soon as we pulled her up, which was funny because with my first, she didn't cry at all, but she was screaming. And yeah, it was the most perfect moment.
Wow.
I think my favorite memory that I've had from this last birth was right at the last 15 minutes before the baby was born. I'm in the kitchen wiping myself off because I'm so tired from the
counter
pressures, and I have an assistant that's kind of helping me. I come back in, and when I walk in the room, Brianna has the biggest smile on her face. The biggest smile. I'm like, what are you smiling about? And she just looks at me, and she didn't say anything. I was like, I'm smiling. This is the best thing ever. And I was like, my goodness. She's in here smiling, and she's like, I'm about to have the baby, and she's literally laughing and talking to the baby all sweet, and it was incredible.
That's beautiful. Wow. Jerry, I'm interested in the first birth. You had your list of notes, and you were referring back to your notes and everything. How did you prepare, and how did you feel in terms of your preparation going into the second birth?
This time, I feel like I already knew a lot more of the material, and I feel like, especially since we reviewed it, even in taking the class, I feel like I didn't really pay attention this time as much as I could have.
I got mad at him about that a few times.
I was like, I already know what she's gonna say. I know this, and a lot of the science and physiology stuff. I'm already good at that, and so I was like, okay, well, I feel like this time is different because I decided I was just gonna do what I felt was right. And Brianna gave me one or two things that she's like, this is the only thing I absolutely have to have you do. And everything else, she's like, I just trust you. And so I just didn't have something in front of me this time to say, okay, this is the time to start doing this or do this or do this. We just let it go, let it flow with what felt right. And I feel like the stuff that I had learned and practiced just came at the right time.
So something's coming up for me, and it's one, just watching Matthew's face as you were describing the last few minutes, Brianna, especially around the stretching. I saw Matthew's eyes and his face do a thing. But what it was communicating to me was that the reverence and the honoring of women, I don't know, you can tell me if I'm off here, babe, but that's what I could just imagine your inner monologue being like, wow, women are amazing. Birthing humans are amazing. That's all I was getting from that look. And then hearing Jerry share, some of his perspective and how he witnessed and experienced it. It is so important for husbands, fathers, partners, birth team members, however they are classified, to hear birth stories, especially before going into a birth.
Absolutely.
So for you, listener, I'm giving homework now. If you have not shared any of these stories, if you have not shared this story, if you have not shared the podcast with your partner, you need to. And they need to hear this because of course, the experiential thing, it is what it is. You can't go through that until you go through it. But just to hear some of these things, like what the body is capable of doing, the pushing process or the allowing the body to push process, just all of that. We had very close friends have a birth recently. It was their first. And I remember having conversations with our friend, dad, telling him about my birth so that he could have some frames of reference here. Because if we as women feel like we're not well educated and supported in going into a birth, can you even imagine how empowered the average man feels going into a birth experience? Yeah. So I just think listening to birth stories in person, ideally, but that's why we have this show, for the dads, for the birth partners, I just think it's an essential part of gearing up to that experience. So that's just what came up for me. So I don't know, maybe you, Matthew, you and Jerry can head something up and have a thing for partners to just hear these stories and to just connect with that reverence and that honoring of the experience of the process, and to also normalize some of it, reduce the fears, reduce the unknown, and just embrace it. So that's what came up for me and y'all's sharing, and then watching Matthew's response, because I imagine it would be a very similar response to other men listening. And just the oxytocin going on right now from those last few moments, and the healing. You brought up healing, Brianna, and you mentioned this birth kind of being your another chance, another go to just be that advocate for yourself. You said one of those big overarching influencers and inspiration was to birth on your own terms. Do you feel like you birthed on your own terms?
Oh, 100%. And I would do it 100 times over. There's literally, sometimes you look back at events like birth and you think of little things you could change. There is nothing I would change about my birthing experience. It was so incredible. And I remember finishing it, and Jerry, I think it's in our vlog, you can see it in the birthing vlog. Afterwards, he asked me how the experience was, and I was just so in shock. I just told him it was the most amazing thing I've ever experienced. It was life-changing. And one thing I love is the birthing class we took. In the class, she says, if we want to change the world, we have to change the way the world looks at childbirth and the way children are brought into this world. And I 100% agree. Birth is so powerful when it's done the correct way on a woman's terms, because it empowers not only the woman, but it empowers the father getting to witness his woman bring a child into the world that way. And it's something so special and peaceful and beautiful for the child who gets brought into the world gently, and to parents that understand the real power that we have in ourselves. And honestly, looking at my birth afterwards, I told Jerry that I was so proud because I had an unassisted birth without having an unassisted birth. And I could have done it all on my own. And that was the most powerful thing to me, was no one had to do anything for me. I did it all on my own. And as a woman, there's just a new kind of high that comes from that. It's just so powerful.
And I think Brianna would agree when I say I amend that you didn't do it all on your own.
No.
And I think that's something important for us to recognize, just as a society. Like, I think people need to, I wish birthing was more normalized in this way, and that we relied on a partner. Like even from the first birth to the second birth, Brianna said almost immediately, like, this birth wouldn't have been like this if you weren't here. And so that was empowering for me, because growing up, my idea of a dad in birth was he's asleep on the couch waiting for the baby to come out.
Yeah.
Like, we don't talk enough about men. Like, when I tell people what I did during these births, they're like, you did that? Like, why?
Yeah.
Like, they think that, I gave her the baby, and so now I just don't do anything until the baby comes out. Like, I think that, she had the baby and she did so much work, but it was us together that made that experience celestial.
Will you take a quick minute, Jerry, and just describe, what you were doing during the birth process? Like, what were you up to? I mean, you mentioned that you were providing counter pressure, but can you walk us through some of the things that you were doing?
Yeah,
I was managing, the room as a whole.
He was the birth room protector.
The birth bouncer.
Yep.
If there was too many emotions or someone in the corner saying something that could be negative to Brianna's thought process, then I kicked him out. And I was constantly there with some people that Brianna personally invited to help me, like you said, do those counter pressures. And I ran the team of people saying, go get me more washcloths, go get me this, go get this for Brianna, go get her some Gatorade. Mom was getting crazy. I said, Mom, go to the store and get pizza. Everyone was getting missions so that nobody felt left out. And so I was helping regulate everything else around Brianna, so she didn't have to think about what everybody else was doing. And on top of that, again, just the physical demands that were needed was very difficult. And it was good to be able to have a team of people for that, because Brianna likes counter pressure. She liked to be on all fours when she was doing a lot of her contractions or waves. And, so she preferred to have two people on each side of her, pushing on her iliac crests. And
Full force.
Full force, I call it, and I couldn't do that by myself, so it was managing the rotation and who was going to be next, and there was a lot going on with that, while at the same time not forgetting that Brianna's feeling a lot of things that she probably won't tell me. And so I had to pay attention to her needs too, while everybody else was trying to do something to feel important. And what's really interesting is, like, even though for us, like for me, it felt like I was busy and had a lot of work to do, like the midwives actually just kind of sat in the living room and did nothing like the whole time. They walked in like every 30 minutes and was like, "What's going on?" "Oh, still working." "Okay, bye." They walked out, and they had a student, and the student, like, I heard her say, like, "Is every birth like this, like where we don't do anything?" And they're like, "Absolutely not." When they were done, they were like, "I wish we could say we helped, but we didn't do anything." Like, wow. They really didn't. They were just there, and they offered that comfort of, if something happened, we have an extra set of medically in tune minds who say, "I know how to handle this next." But really, I mean, if they weren't there, like, it wouldn't have made any difference. Like, they literally didn't do anything.
And that's how birth should be, though.
To actually impact,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Like,
your care provider should be a safety net, not
everything she needed,
hands-on.
Like, I was there, or I brought her, at the drop of a hat. And I mean, I went to the bathroom once. Like, other than that, I was always next to her, like touching her, or on my knees, holding her hand, or rubbing her back,
or coaching me through my breaths.
Yeah.
If I would be breathing too quickly, he would say, "Okay, breathe with me," and he'd be like, "Look at me, keep your voice low," that kind of stuff. He would help kind of remind me to help keep me relaxed.
And so every single second that Brianna was enduring of that labor, like, I was there. So the labor, to think of the memory without me there doesn't make sense. If you look at the pictures or the videos, there's not a frame I'm not in it. And I think there's power in that. Like, men need to realize that their potential in this, I shouldn't say just men, like any birthing partner who's chosen, like, for this, like, it is such an honorary role that has to be taken to the furthest extreme. And I took it seriously, and I think that I definitely contributed to the turnout of how everything happened.
Mm-hmm.
That's the truth, man. Thank you for describing that, because we didn't know. Like, we in hearing that, it reminded me of my role in our birth, Sarah.
Yeah.
And it definitely is different than what I think a lot of the story is out there of the dad waiting in the waiting room of the hospital, smoking a cigarette and waiting for the kid to be born, and I totally can see now why that was a team effort between the two of you. And I totally get why you were tired too, Jerry. And I'm happy that you described that. And because I think it's going to give other partners an opportunity to put themselves in those shoes and see themselves stepping up into the role in that way. And as evidenced by both of your story, it was just, the result was powerful.
Yeah. Giving men, birthing partners, but if we're just saying men right now, the opportunity to go into birth with something to transform with just as much as the woman does, the birthing person. Because, everyone who's pregnant and you're planning for a birth, like, you're in for this big thing. And to create its own unique, because it's going to be different in many ways, but mirrors and parallels that, dad, you have the opportunity to show up in a way and show something about yourself and learn something about yourself, and, like, you're going to be birthing too. So to just shift the narrative around that you have this incredible opportunity, and it's not something to be deterred from, or to be discouraged by. It's something that you have a really great opportunity to step into. And I'm just going to say it, Jerry and Brianna, I'm kind of in love with both of you right now. So there's that.
We like you guys too.
Oh, this has just been so incredible. So many nuggets here. I mean, my notebook is so full right now from just all the elements that we've gone through in terms of preparing, and then the experience itself, and then the role of partner. This has just been this is packed. This is like, you are getting what you paid for and more when you hit play on this one. So any just closing thoughts or suggestions or resources that you would want to share with listeners?
First off, I just want to note, I don't think I mentioned it, I didn't tear with this birth, by the way. I had barely any skid marks, they said. So I accomplished my goal, and I know it was because of preparation and knowing what I was getting myself into with the home birth. And that kind of leads back to our class that we took. It's a Utah-based class because that's where we went to it the first time. It's called the Curtis Method. It's a hypnobirthing class, but she does do virtual classes because of COVID. She's transferred over to those. So we were still able to take it when we were here in Indiana. And I think she's going to keep it that way. So if you're interested in a phenomenal birthing class, I've recommended so many friends that class and they all love it. So I'll send you the information,
Great.
Sarah, so you can put that in there.
Great.
But I also read the Ina May Guide to Childbirth. Of course, an amazing book. And I read the Mongan Method for hypnobirthing book. Sorry. And really, I just did my homework. So like I mentioned, I listened to you guys' podcast, probably 2 or 3 episodes a day, because I found you guys in preparation for this birth. And I would just blow through as many as I could because I just wanted to fill myself with all of the positive birthing vibes as I could. And I watched a lot of positive birth videos on YouTube. So I would look up emotional or happy or positive home birth vlogs and that kind of stuff, and I would just watch them all the time. Jerry would come in the room at random times and be like, "What are you watching? Why is there moaning? What is going on?" I'm like, "It's just a birth video, I promise."
It's a birth going exactly the way it should be because it sounds like
Yes.
this.
He's like, "It sounds so bad every time I come in this room." But yeah, I watched them all the time. And in my birthing class, they gave us meditations to listen to because of hypnobirthing. It's basically learning how to put yourself in a deep self meditation. So I listened to those every night, and I listened to my positive affirmations birthing track probably 3 to 6 times a day. So I was filling myself as full as I could with everything positive with birth. Jerry, I talked to him beforehand, and we've discussed this before, that I wanted a rule no one was able to have negative talk about birth around me. And so he helped buffer that too. If we were ever in conversation with friends and they're like, "Oh yeah, I just, gave birth a couple months ago and it was horrible and this happened," he would always cut them off and be like, "Oh, we don't talk about negative birth experiences around Brianna because she's preparing for, her home birth." And he'd kind of buffer that with me too, which is really important. Birth partners help your pregnant wives keep positivity around them because everybody loves to share horror stories. So
They do.
So yeah, we did our homework a lot on this one, even more so than last time. And like Jerry said, he was a big participant. He would do my meditations with me and my breathing exercises on the birth ball. And I practice my breathing, 3 to 4 times a week, babe? Yeah. And just, I always tell everyone this: if you're preparing for a birth, it's the same type of preparation as if you're preparing for a marathon, because it's a marathon of your body. If you were going to run a marathon, you aren't just going to show up on the day of the race, though that is a big part. You have to be running every single day or doing your proper exercises. You have to be eating right. You have to be probably studying techniques. You have to get yourself in the right mindset. A lot of running is your mind. And it's the same way with birthing. You don't just show up to the hospital and pop a baby out and expect everything to go your way. You have to be educated, and you have to educate yourself on all of your options, even if you're birthing in a hospital. Because if you don't know your options, then it's not true consent, in my opinion. So that's one thing that I find a lot of power in, is knowing all the science and the information behind every aspect of what your body's doing and every intervention that could happen. Just educate yourself. That's the biggest thing, I think.
I think for my closing remarks, I would say that people are stronger than they can ever know. And watching something like this, just totally confirms that. 2 days ago, Brianna got a splinter and cried about that and was so upset and complained and was like, "I'd rather have the baby again than have this splinter."
I think I said it 1,000 times.
Yeah. And I'm like, who says that? Who's like, "I'd rather have a baby than have this splinter"? That just, it seems exaggerated, but she's dead serious. Because I wouldn't say she's mastered birthing. We haven't mastered birthing, but I feel like our understanding of it, is on another level. And I feel like a lot of people need to experience this and realize really what we're capable of, and men too, to say it's okay for you to be a vital role. I've had people where I try to explain what I feel like I do, And people immediately will downplay that and say, yeah, but your wife had to do this and this. Like, there's no way that your birth experience was as hard as hers. And I'm like, we're not comparing the two. I'm adding on to that experience, and I have my own level of difficulty that I have to go through on a personal level. I'm not going to attempt to compare my complete birth experience to what Brianna went through, because I can't physiologically, and I won't ever.
Yeah.
But I don't think that should be downplayed for anybody. I think that we have to realize, as a whole, and hopefully the world can kind of progress with this as this trends and people really begin to realize, like, wow, like birth can happen like this. And we're seeing it with Netflix shows and things like that of people birthing and talking about calling the midwife. And the more exposure you can get, the better. So we're all for, obviously, this podcast, because it's representing what I feel like I've become preachy about almost. I never thought that I would be talking to people about childbirth as like a conversation topic and be laughing about it. Like, but definitely changed me, I think, as much as it changed her.
Love it. That's awesome.
Okay, you guys. I have to go do something with all these feelings happening right now. You all are amazing. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm going to put links to as much as I possibly can from everything that we've talked about. Of course, your vlog, your podcast, and then some of the great resources that you listed. So check out the show notes, listener, in whatever device you are listening with, whatever platform. Go check out those notes, and there will be links for you. And again, thank you all so much for being with us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for having us. You guys are a lot of fun.
Quick note about the Doing It at Home podcast. Matthew and I are not doctors or medical professionals, and nothing we say should be taken as medical advice or opinion. If you have medical or health-related questions, please take them to a trained professional. We're here simply to entertain you with stories and conversations about pregnancy, birth, and parenthood.